Okay, so thanks for joining everyone today. So I'm just going to tell you briefly about research publication. How can you get started with research and where to publish and how to publish. If you have any question, I'm more than happy whether you stop me in the middle or at the end of it. I have no problem with it. So the first thing is, what is research? I'll just tell you briefly about research, different research methodologies, and I think the main focus would be that where can you publish and what to publish. So research basically it systematically investigates materials and resources to establish facts and reach new conclusions to help advancement in medicine. Now, the term publication basically is derived from Latin word. It's called publicare, which means to make things public. And the aim of that was that any research article publication should be made publicly available for free. Research is important, and the reason for that is if you want to improve your career employability, improve your CV, if you want to get any fellowships and things, so you do need some research papers in your CV. Now, what are the different types kind of research? So there are three different varieties of research. If you want to categorize them broadly, these can be categorized into qualitative research, quantitative research, and the third one is a mixture of both qualitative and quantitative. Qualitative research, if you think of it broadly, it deals with quality, which means that you are investigating human experience and behavior, but you're not dealing with any numbers over here. You're not doing any data analysis. You're not looking into statistical analysis over here. All you're looking at is just general behavior and experience and what happens with it. So that's your qualitative research. Quantitative research, so qualitative research can be that this is good, this is bad. Quantitative research, on the other hand, it deals with developing a relationship between different variables. For example, you want to establish whether obesity is associated with diabetes, hypertension, or not. So here you need to deal with numbers. You need some sort of analysis. And in order to do that, you have to create a link. You need a data, and you have to analyze the data. That more comes under the terms of quantitative research. And sometimes you can have a combination of both, where you look at the quality and you look at the quantity, which means you may do some data analysis and you may not do a data analysis. The combination of two is called a mixed method research, or qualitative and quantitative research. So this is just to give you an idea to how do you differentiate between the two. So qualitative means it's more about like asking a question, why is something happening? For example, somebody's getting diabetes. The question is, why is he getting diabetes? And the quantitative purpose of it is that then you ask, okay, how many people are getting diabetes? In qualitative, you mainly look at observation. So do you look at the patient? Okay, are they obese? Are they not doing exercise and things? And then on the quantitative side, you look at numbers. Because if they're obese, how many of these patients are obese? How many don't do any exercise? And you try to link the two. Qualitative, you observe the characteristics and you interpret to see whether there is any link. Quantitative, you have to measure. For example, if you see, okay, there are 50 obese people, there are 35 of them are diabetic, so that's your qualitative. Quantitative, okay, that these 35 are diabetic, what's their BMI? And the 15 that don't have diabetes, what's their BMI? So you try to link the two. Qualitative is more about grouping of common data. It has nothing to do with statistical analysis. You don't do any statistical analysis over here. Whereas quantitative, you need to do statistical analysis to reach a conclusion. Now, why do we do research? So there are three basic aims of a research process. The first one is exploratory. Exploratory means you just want to explore something. It's unstructured, and you do it to explore a group of questions. It might be a single question. It might be more than one question. It doesn't mean that you will reach a conclusion or an answer at the end of this stage. It's just you look at data and see what's happening. Mostly exploratory kind of research is done to explore data where we don't have any information about. We might have some information about that there is something happening, but we don't know why it's happening. So this is purely exploratory research. Descriptive is more structured. And what you do is you are aiming at something to understand the issue that, okay, this is happening, but why it's happening. And the purpose of that is you do some data collection to find out whether there is any connection, is there any association between different variables leading to this. So you describe the association, you explain, and then try to validate their findings. And the final phase of a research process is explanatory. And this is even more structured. So it's a highly structured process. All the data that you have, you are conducting that as a part of the process to see, is there any existing link between these two? And the most common way to do that is usually you run experiments or trials to reach a conclusion. So I'm not going to waste too much time on this. This is just a few examples of different categories of studies which you can put in qualitative research and quantitative research. So on the left-hand side, you can see qualitative research, quantitative. On the right, you can see qualitative. I'll give you these slides in the end. I'll send it to Ahmed, and then he can share with all of you. Now, there are, generally speaking, there are various research types, but I'll just tell you about these 5 main broad categories. The first one is called longitudinal studies. These include like cohort studies, cross-sectional case control studies. What you do in this case is you follow a group of people. You don't follow the whole population. You just collect a subset of or a sample of population, and you follow them over time. And you try to find out, is there any correlation between two variables, or a disease and something, or an exposure. That's your longitudinal study. Cross-sectional study, on the other hand, it's more like a snapshot of something. You're looking at something and establishing correlation at the same time. If you think of an example of it, it could be that, for example, people who are taking vitamin C in summertime, they're not getting any hay fever. But this can vary. For example, people might be taking vitamin C in wintertime, but there are no pollens. So the exposure and the outcome can vary. So cross-sectional study is a bit tricky in that sense. Correlational studies mainly to determine if there is any relationship between 2 or more variables, to see, for example, if you said that diabetes is linked with obesity. So you're trying to establish this, that is there any link really between the two? Experimental studies, it's more rigorous process. You need a lot of data. You need proper resources for that. So that's basically to establish an association between a cause or an exposure, and you want to establish that this exposure is related to this outcome. It's done in a more sort of controlled environment, which means that you're not just going to expose people everywhere. So it has to be an intervention, but in a structured or in controlled environment. And the final phase of this is usually clinical trials, which is randomized clinical trials. And the clinical trials can be randomized or non-randomized clinical trials. And then there are different categories of that in which you do like single blinding, double blinding, which is to deal with whether the patient know what they're receiving. The investigators know which group is receiving the treatment and which group is not receiving the treatment. And the third one is that nobody knows anything what's happening. It's also called data concealment, which means that nobody is aware of what's happening. Now, what I would like to focus mainly on is that what can you publish and what you should aim for publish if you haven't published at all. There are certain things that you can publish quickly. It's easy to do. And then there are other things that are time consuming. It needs more experience. The easiest thing to publish is case report. So case report, all you need is really a single patient with some. Now, case report has, there are guidelines called care guidelines. You can Google it. It's a checklist, and that's generally recommended to follow if you want to write a case report. If you want to write a case report, the key thing is that you need to focus on 3 things over here. One is there any intervention that you have done that is unique, that is unusual, which has led to some certain outcome? 2, is there any new exposure that has resulted in something which people may be aware of or may not be aware of? And the third one is, okay, what is the outcome of, if you saw somebody, what was the outcome of it? So that's generally a case report. And if you want to publish a case report, what you want to have is some sort of educational outcome from it. There should be some key feature that this is the outcome, this is the take-home message of it. And that's what mainly journals are interested in. The advantages of case report is it's easy to write. it doesn't cost much. It doesn't need any financial resources really. Most journals do charge. It's called APC, or article processing charges. Most journals do charge some money, but if you're somebody from low-income countries or low-middle-income countries, I think about 90% of journal would give you a waiver on everything, which means they will not charge you any money at all. All you need to do is identify some rare disease or drug that has resulted in something. It could be just adverse reaction to something. It doesn't need to be that it has never been published before. It should be published 1,000 times, doesn't matter. If you see something new in your community, you can publish it. All you need is a single case for this. It's observational. All you do is just observe a patient. You may have some data, for example, blood test, scans, which you can include in as a part of your case report, and it's educational. The disadvantages are it's less valuable compared to more advanced studies or complicated studies. There are certain journals, most journals will accept it, but certain journals may not accept this report. The other thing with this is that there is certain limits. So if you look at most journals, there is a word count limit that you can't go.
Sir, I'm so sorry, sir. Can you please change the settings in the security section and stop the participant from turning on their mic?
Okay, I think I have done it.
Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, tips to successful publication. Look for something unusual. If you find any unusual case, unusual medicine, unusual clinical presentation of a disease, for example, if you see a patient with TB and they come with pericardial effusion, that's a bit unusual thing, and you can publish it. If you give certain medicine, for example, you give somebody, let's say you have given somebody aspirin, and you have never seen rash associated with aspirin before, and you see that this person comes with quite nasty rash all over, you can publish it. All you need is some pictures of it. Do remember that for any case report, if you want to publish it, you need patient consent form. And there are certain, it's not a compulsion for every journal, but some journals do like patient's perspective, which means that if you get something from patient, ask them that, okay, what do they think about how their experience was when this happened, treatment and all that. It might vary in our setting compared to Western world, because in Western world, patients are more involved in their care. And it has some personal impact if you're going to publish it. Now, the other thing is case series. So it's more like case report, but it's called case series. And again, there's a bit of variation over here. So most journals, they need 5 to 6 cases for it to be considered as a case series. But there are other journals where if you've got 4 patients, then it should be fine. You can submit it as a case series. It's again a descriptive analysis of series of people with the same disease or with the same treatment. So it doesn't need to be a disease. If you're given some treatment to someone, they have they had the same side effect, or they experienced the same side effect as a result of that treatment. So that's again a case series. It is used to illustrate a condition, treatment, or reaction to treatment. Advantages are more or less similar to case report, that it's easy to conduct. You don't have a comparison group, so you don't need to worry about that. Less time consuming because you know about the condition. So your discussion introduction is going to be more or less the same, just like a case report. But you've got more patients, so you might just need to subdivide them into patient 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can present some of the finding in a tabular form. Again, lesser financial resources than randomized controlled trial, case controls, or cohort studies. Disadvantage is again that it is less evidence-based compared to others, and you need more patients. You need at least 4 patients for it to be considered case series. There are certain journals where if you've got 8 or 9 patients, I think the cutoff is 8 patients. If you've got 8 patients, then you can submit this study as a original article, which means you don't need to submit it as a case series anymore. So cross-sectional studies, which I mentioned earlier, that these are observational studies. All you're doing is it's more like a snapshot. So you're doing something at that point and combining the two or associating the two at the same time. It's used to measure prevalence of health outcomes. To understand the determinants of health and describe features of a certain population, which I mentioned earlier, that, for example, you're trying to link vitamin C with pollen exposure or hay fever. So it's a snapshot of that point. So the outcome can vary, the exposure can vary between times. For example, in winter, you don't have pollens, so you won't have that association. Advantage is it's relatively quick and easy to conduct. There are not much ethical issues in terms of doing cross-sectional studies, because you're not going to expose patients to, it's not a deliberate exposure or not deliberate treatment, it's something that's happening. You can study multiple associations at the same time in a single study, and it helps to determine prevalence. You can calculate certain values with this, and then the data is usually collected through questionnaire. The downside of this is that you can subconsciously introduce selection bias over here. You might not be aware, but you can introduce selection bias by including certain characteristics of patients. The other thing to be aware about this is that cross-sectional study is not a good study for rare disease. You can't use this for rare disease or casual reference. The association identified may be difficult to determine. For example, you might not be able to establish that this is actually the association between the two. Now, so what I would suggest is that for any study, if you're writing it, for example, for case report, you follow the care guidelines. For every study, there are certain tools that you need to use to exclude bias or minimize bias. For cross-sectional studies, generally, there are two tools that you can use. One is called AHRQ, which is Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality questionnaire, or tool risk assessment tool. And the other one is called Effective Public Health Practice Project, or EPHPP risk assessment tool. So this is what cross-sectional study looks like. You have a target population, and then you collect a subsample of that, and then you collect data from that. And what you do is you look at 4 outcomes of it. First one is there is exposure, there is the intended outcome or the outcome of interest. 2, there is exposure, but there is no outcome of interest. Third one is there is no exposure, but there is outcome of interest. The fourth one is this group or the patients in this group don't have the exposure and they don't have the intended or the interest outcome. Cohort studies, these are again longitudinal studies. The downside of these studies is that these studies are a bit longer. They can be done as either retrospective studies or prospective studies. You need longer duration follow-up for these patients. So they can be like 12 months, 24 months follow-up duration, which is time consuming. It needs a lot of resources. The benefit of it is that you can follow up these patients, and most of these patients have similar characteristics. They would have more or less the same outcome or exposure. So you can follow up over time and see what happens to them. The tools that you can use for bias in this case is you can use Newcastle Ottawa scale, and you can use Robbins e-tool. They're both available. If you Google Cochrane library, they're both available over there free of cost. Advantages is you can use it for temporal sequence between exposure and outcome. You can calculate certain things with this. For example, you can calculate incidence with this. You can calculate absolute risk, relative risk, risk difference, and you can look at multiple outcomes with the same exposure. A single exposure can be linked to various outcomes in a single study. Disadvantages are it's not a good study for rare disease. If you go to rare disease, you're not going to find that many patients in a cohort study or subgroup where you can follow them up. It needs longer follow-up, which means more financial resources. And sometimes what can happen is that you can have a problem with the bias because of recollection. Case control studies, again, so you have got cases and you've got controls. Cases have disease and control don't have disease, and then you follow them up over time. This is usually a good study for case for rare diseases. If you've got rare disease, rare outcome, it's a good study to do. The other thing you can do is it's called reviews. So there are 5 different kind of reviews. The first one is systematic review and meta-analysis. Then there is scoping review, rapid reviews, umbrella reviews, and narrative reviews. So systematic reviews are generally there. This is a systematic approach. There is a pre-specified question, there is pre-specified eligibility criteria, and you want to reach a certain outcome or formulated research question. The uses of this are they're more explicit and reproducible because of the systematic methodology that we follow to reduce bias. It usually starts with a research question, and you need to have a written protocol for this. There's a literature search. The literature search should be performed on at least 3 search engines like PubMed, Midline, Science Direct, Google Scholar. So you need to use at least 3 search engines. And ideally, the literature search should be done by at least 2 reviewers in a systematic review. It may include meta-analysis, in which case it's called systematic review and meta-analysis, and you will need to do some statistical analysis in that case. Now, there are various softwares you can use for meta-analysis. These include STAT, but that's usually, it doesn't come free. And the other one is called Rayman, which is freely available on Cochrane Library. You can either do automatic data selection, or you can just manually do data entry for analysis. There are a lot of tutorials on Cochrane and YouTube as well. You can search for it. Literature screening, you can do it through Rhine, which is a literature screening software. It removes, duplicates everything automatically for you. It's free of cost. And the other one is Covidence. It's free of cost if you want to do 1 systematic review in a year. If you want to do more than that, you have to pay for it. You can register your systematic review if you're doing a Cochrane one. That's a bit more complicated. If it's not Cochrane, you can publish it on Prospero registry. And the key things in a meta-analysis are keywords, mesh headings, database, and statistical analysis. Systematic reviews enables research and to process and analyze collected data effectively, which means you get meaningful results and findings. Disadvantages are it needs some expertise, it's difficult to do, and it includes statistical analysis. The risk of bias is pretty much less in systematic reviews unless you introduce some sort of bias, and that can result in overestimating of certain studies' effects. Then the rapid reviews, these are more or less similar to systematic reviews. The only difference between the two is that you exclude certain steps in it. For example, the literature search might be done by a single reviewer. You might not go through 3 literature search engines. You might just do 1 or 2. More or less, the outcomes are the same, and they look at the same process. Umbrella review is generally used to review multiple systematic reviews. So you've got systematic reviews and you look at the results outcome of that. So that's more umbrella review. It uses explicit systematic methods for research to identify systematic reviews on related questions. The aim is to synthesize result of systematic reviews across different outcomes or reported outcomes. The advantage is it allows you to compile evidence from multiple reviews into one accessible and usable document. The limitation is that there is a requirement of pre-existing narrower component reviews, which means that you need to have systematic reviews in order to be able to do this. Scoping review is generally exploratory and it looks at broad question. It doesn't look at something like systematic review. It's looking at more broader concept. And compared to systematic review, it's looking at more systematic review is looking at more a targeted question, a targeted outcome. This is entirely different to that. It helps to map that what knowledge do we have, what is the literature that we have in terms of current topic. And scoping reviews generally are not limited to peer-reviewed literature. For example, it doesn't need to be something based on published literature. You can literally look at gray literature as well. The key thing about scoping review is that if you don't find any studies, then there is no point in systematic reviews. So generally people do it about certain things that there is not much information available about to decide whether they should do systematic review. So that's a good start if you do scoping review in that sense. And you can use similar tools like the Rhine and Covidence for scoping reviews as well. So these are the tools that you can use for screening: Covidence, NVivo, Rhine, and Rayman software, which you can use for data analysis. Now, where to publish? Generally, what I suggest to people who have less experience with publication, I suggest that you look for smaller PubMed index journals. Don't look for non-PubMed index, because then that doesn't count really. So look for PubMed index journals. You can use Google to look for different journals. Look at the acceptance rate, that what's their acceptance rate. So look for any journal whose acceptance rate is somewhere in about 40–50%. Highlight key educational message in your case report. Some people, what they do is they start criticizing their colleagues that, okay, this was done and we've picked up this. I generally suggest not to do that. Just focus on the key message. What's the message? Most journals do prefer to have some patient's perspective. So if you get that, that's even useful to include, and patient consent form. This is a list of journals I have created for you guys. That most of these journals provide 100% waiver for people from low-income countries. There's another journal that I work with them as well. It's called Cureaus. They give you about 40% discount. The good thing about them is that if there are less number of errors, you can publish it free of cost with them as well. So if anybody needs help with that, I'm more than happy to help. BMJ journals, I think there are about 7 or 8 BMJ different journals, from systematic reviews to case reports, original articles. All of them give you 100% waiver if you are from a low-income country. So there are certain tools that you can use for academic writing. So if you're writing a case report, because English is not our first language, so we generally do a lot of mistakes. These are the websites that you can use. For example, Grammarly.com, paperpal.com, Perplexity, ChatGPT. ChatGPT will just generally write things for you. So you can use it to a certain extent, but don't rely on it 100%. What I would suggest is that create 3 or 4 accounts in each of these websites, and use a portion of your, so copy and paste portion of your case report into it in different accounts. And that way you can literally do the whole case report in one of these websites for free. You don't need to pay anything for that. How to organize your references. So there are certain websites that you can use. One of them is called Mendeley. It's again free. EndNote, this is free as well. It will help you to organize your references for the end references. And there are certain websites that you can use for citation conversion. For example, some people are not good with converting references from one style to another. For example, APS6 or Vancouver or Howard style. So these are the various websites that you can use, and they will automatically generate free citation for you. They will convert it from one form to another form for you. Some people may not have access to Google Documents, so create online Google document. If you're working as a group of 3 or 4 people, you can share Google Documents with each other. You can work it online, and you can see the changes everybody makes to it. And it also offers you free document or Word access. There are certain things you can use. For example, if you don't write graph, you don't like certain graphs, you can use Mind the Graph, which is again free, and Perpetual Paperpal Evaluator. So these can be used to change figures, references, and things for you. There are certain other websites like I love graph imaging. You can Google it literally, and they will help you to graph images, change the size of images if you need to. Again, these websites are mostly free. So these are various tools that you might find useful if you're doing any note-taking for data visualization, reference management, paper writing, or literature review. And these are the references. Okay. Any questions? Does anybody have any question about research or publications?
Sir, we can begin the rest of the lecture.
Okay. Fine. So I think we covered most of it. Has anybody got any questions so far? If they want to ask anything about anything in particular. So I don't know how far did you manage to see our listen when I was talking. And did you see this slide or you didn't see this slide?
Sir, we saw this slide, sir.
Okay, you saw this one.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And what about this one? So these are the references. So what I've done is here is I've included different references for different websites which you can use for literature search. There are a couple of links which you can use for different softwares that you can use for your research purposes. And the other links which you normally need for either for academic writing, editing, and those things I've included in the middle of the slide. So you can use, have a look at them, and you can use them for academic writing or helping with editing. Any questions so far?
Sir, I think since our participants were very less today, because usually what happens, sir, is that we record the videos and we upload them onto our YouTube channel. So mostly doctors usually watch lectures over there. So in case, sir, if anyone contacted me regarding any questions or if they wanted any sort of guidance, I will give them your contact number and they can contact you through WhatsApp, sir, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's fine. You can either email me or WhatsApp me. I don't have any problem.
Yeah, sure, sir.
I'll send you the slide as well, just in case if they want to use it, because there are some useful links in it which they can use.
Sure, sir. That would be great, sir. Thank you so much for this, sir.
No problem.
Thank you so much,
Okay,
sir.
if you need any further teaching about anything like cardiology wise or medicine wise or any further research topics, I'm more than happy to deliver them as well. The only thing is I usually don't have much time, but if you need anything, then just text me and I'm happy to do it.
Thank you so much, sir. We understand that, sir, you have a very busy schedule. Obviously, sir, working as a cardiologist in London comes with a lot of responsibilities and a lot of working hours. Thank you so much for this, sir, that you dedicated this time and took this lecture on our platform. Sure, sir, if you could come up with more lectures, sir, that would be great. We really appreciate and we really need such sort of academic activities, sir.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's what we need to do. We need to help each other to make sure that our future generation is up to date with everything.
Exactly, sir. So
if
we have.
anybody needs any help over here, I'm more than happy. You can just contact me for anything you need.
Thank you so much,
If
sir.
I
So
can
we have.
any help here, I'm more than happy to help.
Sure, sir. So we have platforms where there are more than thousands of Afghan doctors and medical students. And I'm sure, sir, all of these doctors have access to our YouTube channel. I'm sure they will watch this lecture. And in case if they wanted anything, I would give them your number. And in case if there were more future lectures, sir, I'm sure we can upload them onto our YouTube channel. They will utilize this and will gain a lot from your lecture and your knowledge, sir.
No problem, Ahmed. Okay, so thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you so much, sir.
Have a nice day.
Have a nice day, sir. Thank you, sir.
Take care. Bye-bye.